Thank you for joining us. Today is the second of our our Investor Insight series for the year. This is probably the fourth year we're doing it, and the first year that we have TalentLaunch, an alliance as a sponsor of ours. We thank them for their support of this series, of us, and certainly for having us in their office and allowing us to have this kind of conversation here. So I'll ask you to take a moment to thank not just them, but also Aaron Grossman, their CEO, who is here in the back, and our gracious host for the evening. So thank you, TalentLaunch Alliance. He may not be aware of the applause, but I think he feels it deep in his heart. In a moment, I'm going to ask everyone to do a quick introduction of themselves. We'll dive in. The conversation is on talent for startups. That's really the heart of it. It is not an over-exaggeration to say that we as early-stage investors invest in the people, not the companies. That's the people that are at the company today, and also the people that those founders will ultimately be able to attract, incentivize, motivate, and retain over the life of the company to grow, because at each stage, with additional capital, with additional support and additional opportunities, we would think and hope that these teams are blossoming and bringing additional industry expertise, functional expertise, and adding to the cultural base of the organization. And those are a couple of things we'll talk about. I'll start off with some questions for our group here, and I hope you'll all chime in with questions of your own as it relates to all things talent and startups. So with that, why don't we move this way and just do a high-level introduction on each of our panelists.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Melissa Sheridan. I am with SilverLine Consulting. I've been with SilverLine now for about 6 years. Our organization is an HR and recruitment consulting company. We were created about 10 years ago, driven by our owner, Julie Maurer, who many of you may know, but her passion for working with entrepreneurs. So on the HR side of things, we often partner with private equity, startup incubators, or venture firms to really work with their portfolio companies that may be too small to have their own HR presence for the time being. So almost like an HR strategist for them. And then on the recruiting side, in the last 3 years, so throughout the pandemic even, we've recruited over 150 professionals. 60% of our roles are with software and SaaS organizations, and we can really recruit all within the four walls of those organizations. But we do a bit of everything, and I think that that's my favorite part about our organization is we have Fortune 500 clients, we have commercial construction clients, we have local law firms, so we do a really broad spectrum. That's about us.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kristen Weber, Vice President of People and Culture at OnShift. OnShift is a local tech company. We're in the SaaS space. We build HR software, so human capital management software, for the post-acute care world, so nursing homes, retirement communities, assisted living facilities. We help them with everything from scheduling, which has so much compliance around it, to recruiting and retaining employees. So HR professional in HR tech, and really excited for this conversation today around talent.
Hi, I'm Sarah Kirsch with Hyland Software. I've been with Hyland for about 8 years. I'm the senior manager over global talent acquisition. We are also a local SaaS company. We're no longer at the startup size, but we used to be. I've been part of Hyland through the rapid growth, and we are continuing to hire. I think this year we're around 900 external new employees that we've hired globally. We are a leading content services provider. We partner with all the different verticals, but government, healthcare, finance, accounting, to help them with their content and their data and their paperwork and their processes, and just make things easier for the organization to run and do what they do best. That's about it.
Cool. My name's Andrew Wolfe. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Bloomfilter. At Bloomfilter, we are building a business process mining system. What that means is we sit on top of Jira, GitHub, and other development systems. We pull the data out, We find where you have issues in your process, and we show you how to remediate them, making teams more predictable, more consistent, and able to hit their commitments. And we are not hiring 900 people. Not yet, yes.
Not based on the seed round, but perhaps based on future financings, right? So let's start with talent on the acquisition side. And Melissa, we'll start with you. You mentioned doing 150 plus searches over the past couple of years. Maybe give us a sense of what separates a good, successful search from those that aren't as successful, whether it's not attracting as many people, the right culture. What makes them really good searches and what makes them not at that level?
Yeah, for me, it's pretty clear, and I can tell during an intake session with a company how it's probably going to go. It's going to be the accessibility that hiring manager or that leader gives to the person that's going to market for you, whether it's an internal recruiter or an external recruiter. Being clear on what looks good to you, and also how to sell the role in the company. So, kind of laying out, if you were a candidate, why would you want to maybe leave a job you're really happy in to come do this role? So that's the biggest thing, is accessibility, being clear with the person that's going to market for you on what it is you're looking for. And it could be soft skills, but also experience. I find that the times that I'm talking to a leader and they're not very precise, or they give me I like a person that sometimes looks like this or is like this. Be as direct as you can, I even like examples of, what is someone that's been really successful in your company, what made them successful, and what did they look like? So really being clear from the get-go on what it is you're looking for and what you want this person to accomplish will set you up for success, I think.
Excellent. And then Andrew, so you're still at the seed stage, right? Some opportunities to bring in talent over the next year or two. What does that look like, though, for you as you think about the talent you have, what sort of resources you're able to marshal with the funding you have to build something of value to get to that next critical stage? How do you think about that as a seed stage?
Yeah, so I look at it in first a quadrant, right? XY axis, culture, talent, right, and productivity. And you want, obviously, as a seed stage startup, you can't really afford anyone except the people in the top right quadrant. You can't have low productivity, low culture people. You can't have high culture, low productivity people either, even though they're fun to hang out with. And certainly you can't have brilliant assholes either, because they will ruin your whole team. And so knowing that you're up in the top right quadrant, where of course everyone wants high culture, high productive people. No one's saying I want the worst people. And so everyone's competing for that. And you also have the competitive area where you're really risky for an employee. So now you have even if you follow the crossing the chasm, you have the early adopters who are high productivity, high culture. And so you have 10 people you can hire. And the way I think about it is we have to find out what is the thing that we have to be really good at today, right? I happen to have a CS degree and my master's from Georgia Tech. My co-founder has his master's in CS from Akron. We clearly need some engineers because there's a lot of time that goes into engineering, but neither of us really have a marketing background. So we have to find that person in that upper right quadrant that's highly productive, high culture, that can come in and wants to take that risk on building a brand that can be really impactful. And so now you're really the way, you mentioned it, how do we work with people to get those people in? Well, we can be really specific though, because we're so targeted. Hey, you need to be able to come in, work with 2 CS founders who might not have the best communication skills. You need to come in and be able to build the brand. And we know exactly what we're looking for because we know exactly what we have to accomplish to get to that next round of funding. Customer success, something every company needs. We know we need to hire that too because there's only so many hours in the day. So we can really enumerate based on our financial model what exactly we need to focus on and where we need to hire into that to be able to hit and execute a business plan that gets us to that next stage of success, the Series A, Series B, type traction.
Great. So Kristen, fast forwarding maybe a couple stages, right? Because I think you joined OnShift when they're closer to a Series B stage, right? The company had a good 8 figures plus of revenue, a couple hundred employees, more scale. What were the challenges around people, talent, and culture at that point?
Yeah, so I think the challenges, and I'd also say actually the opportunity, right, that goes along with that is the structure that you're able to bring for talent specifically, and more once you have the people, right, more on the retention piece of it. But when you're at that scale, that's when you really start to bring in SMEs in key areas of the business, and it's a little less risky. So it's a little bit of a different pitch, but really hitting people in the sweet spot of their career where they're able to make an impact and build structure, not too much structure where it breaks the process and stops us from being agile, but structure and build a department. Also, we're able to really start to enable our teams to see a career path and some leveling there, and there's real opportunity. So I think that is a good opportunity. It also is a lot of growing pains when you put structure into place too. Making sure that everyone knows their lanes, right? Because in the startup, it's a little bit more scrappy. It's a little bit more, everyone handles everything. And so we're starting to get a little bit more process in place. A lot of growing pains that come with that, but really good opportunity for some SMEs and key leadership to be collaborative there.
Great. And then, Sarah, Hyland is the largest software company in the state. Presence here in Northeast Ohio, but also significant employee base across the country and some international as well. Maybe to talk about at that level of scale, what that next gear is you're shifting into in terms of leading global HR for a software company of that scale.
I mean, the challenges is that we face, we have a lot of employees and hiring managers and leaders who have been with Hyland when we were a startup, and they operate still very much in that mindset. Like, why, when approaching a group of candidates, why would you want to work for Hyland, or why should we hire you, versus we need to be pitching to these individuals, why do they want to work for us? What's been great for Hyland just because of the size that we are, we've been able to build a good infrastructure of internal training and put a large emphasis on career growth and career paths for our employees. So a big emphasis on building pipeline when we are losing employees, especially what a lot of companies have seen this year with a lot of turnover. We're losing people that are mid to senior level for the first time. In many, we haven't really seen that issue years prior. And so backfilling one-to-one, backfilling somebody that has been a developer with Hyland for 10 years, we're not going to be able to backfill that person one-to-one. So we really do have to have a good infrastructure of training department-wide as well as company-wide that can really build. Because I'll say that entry-level hiring pipeline can be very beneficial for diversity, equity, inclusion strategies, for really getting someone when they're looking to build their career, because we can show them a roadmap essentially of where their career could go. So it sets us apart, and it's been helping. Yeah.
Great. So Kristen, let's talk remote. Yeah. So in late 2019, OnShift moved from several floors of the Keith building to a very large kind of next level space at the old post office building, a really nice, beautiful space, and then promptly couldn't live there at all, right, because of...
We actually didn't make the move.
We
did not make the move. We are still in the Keith. COVID stopped it.
Okay, so yeah. I guess I missed that press release. Yeah. Okay. So how has that shift in remote been then for the company, and how have you managed it to whatever the current state of affairs is as far as in-presence, hybrid, remote?
Yeah, so it's been a very interesting couple of years here. So we were planning this big move, and it all got stopped on March 13th, was it? I forget, of 2020, right? And that's when we went home for 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And we got in this mode of, we're going to be remote for 2 weeks. We're going to be remote for 4 weeks. We'll get back to all of our people and culture initiatives when we get back in the office. We're going to, and we did that for, admittedly, a little bit too long. And we realized pretty quickly that the culture and how you really retain your talent and motivate and keep them engaged happens so much more organically when you're all in person. And we realized that we had to really, A, define our culture, and then B, put some initiatives around it, and go back to that word, some structure around it. And we really started to, I think 60% of our hires since COVID have been virtual, have been not in Northeast Ohio. So we're really, have started to expand, which has been great from a talent perspective and our reach. But again, back to getting solidified in our culture has caused us to really look at the way we collaborate and the way we connect with each other. And we've built a lot of initiatives around that. I'm happy to go into detail, but we've built a lot of initiatives around that specifically. And the biggest thing we've done, which has been very impactful, is helping our leaders become more equipped to manage this dispersed workforce. It is a completely different skill set to be able to, we were talking about quiet quitting is the new phenomenon, and being able to recognize when your employees are not engaged, or recognize your top performers, right, and who are your rising stars. And so we've built a lot of programs around that. We've launched a leadership development session around that, and that's how we've kind of overcome this world where we've been flipped on our heads and sent virtually.
Very good. So, Andrew, you just got back to Cleveland after a pretty good stint in Chicago for the Techstars Accelerator. You were there. Techstars, for those of you not familiar, is a national accelerator program in many cities, and one of the more successful of the accelerator programs at helping to identify, provide a little bit of funding, a lot of structure, and help boost companies to the next level where they can raise a Series A. A number of our companies have gone through accelerators in different Techstars cities. I imagine in that petri dish, you've got a lot of exposure to what issues and opportunities other companies are seeing around talent, what some of the dynamics are, because that group, that cohort is national in geography. So give us a sense of what you now know, having had that exposure to all those startups and the Techstars ecosystem.
Yeah, so the first thing I noticed was how a global network effect can occur, right? So Techstars, because it doesn't just operate in the United States, it operates globally. There's a Techstars Israel, there's a Techstars Nigeria, there's a Techstars England. You pick it, there's probably a Techstars in that country minus China. And so when you enter that network, you get access to not just the talent here in the United States and Boulder and LA and Chicago, you get the access to the talent across the board. And so there's like internal job boards, there's internal access to that. And that's powerful. But the more powerful thing that I think we got access to, that we really understood, was the non-traditional ways people hustle to get talent. Putting together a university program was one of the things they taught us, like how do you work with a university and continue that partnership. So like Booth and Northwestern, which are great universities, we can build the relationships there, but not only there, at OSU and Case Western and these other areas to bring talent into our company. And I find that when we're looking for the people that are risk adjusted, we tend to skew on the younger side. In fact, I got my first health insurance bill and it was so hilariously low. I loved it. But when you skew that young, you need to start recruiting early. And it's not just, hey, we're not going to compete with Uber, we're not going to compete with Google, but those aren't the people that are going to come work with us anyways. But our name and our recognition starts there. So when their second job comes along and they're not 22, they're 24 now, and they want to take a swing at a startup, they know who we are. So starting early and indoctrinating people when they first get out of college is super important. And the second is to tap your own network. You'd be shocked the amount of people that probably respect you in a way you don't even realize that you can call, that are experts at what they do. One of our EIRs, Entrepreneurs in Residence, we started talking after the program, and he sold 2 9-figure businesses in his career, and he wants to be our CRO, our Chief Revenue Officer, right? That kind of access to people that you might not think that you could hire that want to actually work with you because cool people doing cool stuff is always awesome. Like, tap your network, and that you'd be shocked how far you can go through. And the last thing I'll say about it is LinkedIn is super powerful. I did not know half of what you could do with LinkedIn, and now it's like almost like a Sunday night game for me, going through LinkedIn and like trying to find out how I can be connected to like Elon Musk. Like, oh, this guy knows that guy, and you can just crazily spider down into your network and find access to people that you didn't think you could, which is, again, super powerful, not only in sales, but recruiting as well, which is actually sales.
Okay. So, Sarah, you're surrounded here. On one side, you've got somebody talking about how easy it is to leverage LinkedIn to find talent. And on the other side, somebody saying 60% of their workforce is no longer native to Northeast Ohio. So how do you deal with the coastal technology companies that are targeting employees across the country in the Midwest and places like Cleveland, where our average salaries may not be as high as some of the coastal salaries, but a place like Hyland has long tenured people who are good at what they do and have a strong culture. How are you using that culture to work for you to insulate?
Well, we play to our strengths. I mean, we know we can't compete with the big, Silicon Valley companies, and we don't pretend to. And I've said this to our recruiters, if there's a candidate that's driven by compensation, that's all they care about, we're not a fit for them. And we'll tell them that. That is not what we're known for. Not to say we don't pay well, but we're not going to be the highest competitor from a compensation perspective compared to some of the startups. However, we offer stability, a great work-life balance, flexibility, career growth. I mean, you could go down. And we have seen a major boomerang of employees that have left over the past 2 years coming back because 1 in 3 people who left during the reshuffle are not happy. They know that what they left for are things that you cannot just wake up one day and you have it all of a sudden. So we're playing to the strength of, we know that we can just sit back and be patient and do what we're good at and recruit what we know is important, and not try to be who we aren't. So we, thankfully, because of the size of our organization, we have offices in other countries and we have a global reach. And so we've been able to, for a long time, been able to open up positions to areas outside of the US and outside of the Cleveland area. We have that luxury of being able to employ people in other regions, but so thankfully we had a little bit of a head start on what we're dealing with now. But yeah, it is challenging because in the end we know what we when we can't afford someone or they're not aligned to kind of what our values are, we don't pursue that.
Excellent. So, Melissa, let's pretend that Andrew isn't here for a moment. So I'm biased, obviously. We invested in Andrew's company. So we like Andrew. We like his business, his vision. But I'm hearing somebody who has this big vision, who's really early, who says, we're really technology oriented. We may not always be the best communicators. Right? Here's who we are and how we're going. How do you think about mapping that to an archetype of culture, of style, of the kind of person that will be successful in a startup environment, which is so different than a larger scale environment?
Yeah, I think what he has is that passion, though, right? So, how the words he said and the things he said, it's like, wow, it would be great to work for him. It's almost, if they didn't do well, I would be surprised based on that level of passion. And it's all about messaging from the very beginning, the first time you reach out to a candidate, and when you're trying to recruit them about, he brought up LinkedIn. And I hear so many times, oh, forget about LinkedIn. People are being bombarded on there. They don't want another message from LinkedIn. And I found that the people that are saying that are maybe the individuals that haven't really understood how to create that compelling message to an individual. And that is going to continue. So if a person doesn't understand the vision for the organization and isn't bought into the success and where it may go, it's going to start at the recruitment process, and you're going to see you're struggling to recruit people, and you're also going to find that you're struggling to retain them. You have to allow them to see what could happen from here and be one of those Cinderella stories. That's why I have a client that is late stage startup that they have 2 developers on their team that have been there for 12 years, which just that's a long time for a developer. And it's and I asked them, why is that? And they said, we can see it. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And that's what you want every employee to say is, I can see it, I can feel it, it's going to happen. And why would I leave before it happens? So I think it's very important to continue that when you're not only talking to candidates but employees of why is it that you started this? Why are you putting your life's work into this? So, and the more connected that individuals can feel to that and they can see it, the more likely they are to stick around.
Okay. So before we open it up to questions from the group, a couple rapid fire, anyone, everyone answer. Assessments. I think it's gone in waves over the past decade or so, people's interest in skills, intellect, and culture, right? Which even as simple as a Myers-Briggs plus. What's your take on the role of assessments of any form for startup land?
I can start it off if you want, because I've done extreme cases on both. So I started my career working for a very, very direct sales company. I moved into staffing, where temp to perm and direct hires, and then I moved on to Eaton, where they don't do any skill-based interviewing. Like it was only behavioral-based interviewing, and I felt like I didn't understand it. I was like, this is very, very different. But I think mixing both is the right answer, especially when you're an early stage company where you don't have much to compare to. No one has ever done this job before. So although this person has to have the skills, that's the requirement. If not, you're wasting your money. You also could they do it? Is it a stretch goal? Is it a stretch role? So I found when I'm talking to candidates, I'm mixing in both. Where sometimes I'll have to apologize to a person. I'm like, I'm going to switch gears. This is, I know we've been going through skills, but I want to switch gears, and I want to do a little bit more of a behavioral assessment. And so I would steer away from doing 100% skill, and I would steer away, especially at an early stage startup, from doing 100% behavioral. But that's my opinion.
Any other thoughts?
We invest in coaching for all of our early people. It's, I think, $400 a month, and it's a small pittance compared to what you have to pay an engineer. But what we find was, and at my previous businesses was true, we had better leadership when we needed it. The people stuck around longer because they were getting actual growth. Like, it wasn't just us telling them, hey, you need to do better over there. Although we did regular one-on-ones to make sure we were giving feedback and meeting with people. But the ultimate thing was that they felt, even when they left, that they were better equipped employees, and they would still refer. We had a net promoter score at like 95% at my previous company. We haven't lost anyone yet. Hope not. And so I recommend looking at those non-traditional benefits that could help level people up in the early stages, because they work with you every day. I talked to Brian, who's one of my engineers. I think you met him at the last event, right? Every day. So I'm constantly giving him feedback of like, hey, do this, don't do that. And I can coach him as an engineer, but as a leader and a manager, he needs that on the side so that when we need him to be that, when we hire those first 3-4 engineers, he can take over, become the manager, and it feels seamless because he was in his head wanting to be that role the entire time.
So I'll add just one. So as an actual assessment, like test assessment to take, right? Predictive index is one that I've used in the past. Got a thumbs up, yeah. So it's good on the hiring front. At OnShift, we are huge DISC users. DISC is really big on not being a hiring tool, so we do not use it for that. But predictive index, you can build out an ideal profile. So if a hiring manager knows what they want, you can really get that profile nailed down. And it doesn't mean someone's right or wrong. What it actually does is gives you pointed interview questions to ask that candidate. Mm-hmm. And then on the back end, when they're hired, you can actually have meaningful conversations. So if somebody is not great at communication, you can compare two profiles and say, this is the way that you would communicate best with this other person. These are some pitfalls that you want to watch out for, and these are some strengths that you want to leverage. And so it plays to everyone's strengths, and it helps you to really map out that culture and make sure that you're using it effectively.
Great. So more so to our at-scale talent leaders in the middle of the panel here, as the dynamic has shifted a little bit and employees have more power, so to say, just in terms of supply and demand, whether that's real or perceived. What else have you noticed about their priorities, right? What's important to people, and how have you felt like you had to make real adjustments in how the companies operate?
I mean, yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, we have we've always invested quite a bit into our employees and their families, and making people feel like they're a part of a larger family. So we've really honed in on that as part of how we keep people just engaged in general. I mean, we keep it as an environment where, we know people's families inside, and we really coach our leaders to look at it that way. That we really want to start every meeting with understanding where the person's at personally, without going into anything uncomfortable, but just kind of where are you at, because that the work is the second part of it.
Along those same lines, there was a very interesting article that was put out, I think, earlier this year from McKinsey, and it grouped the way that we interact with our employees in two different buckets. It grouped it in meaningful interactions, so conversations like that about how people are doing personally. I mean, this was a really trying time the past 2 years for everyone. We actually saw a death ticker, right? We were thinking about life and death every single day. And so that hit people very differently. So meaningful interactions, how are you connecting? And the second bucket was transactions. And transactions are like, your title change and your raise. And if we go out as a company and put all of our buckets in the transactions, there will always be another company that can top us, that can do more and be more, companies from the coast. The transactions are table stakes. We have to pay market value. We have to make sure our benefits plan is meaningful and hitting the right mark. But we really had to, as a leadership team, talk about investing in those meaningful interactions. That sparked a slew of initiatives for us, including our leadership development that I mentioned earlier.
Okay, excellent. Then last question for everybody, then we'll shift to questions from the group. Predictions are hard. They're usually wrong. We are recording this, so you will be held to account. But any predictions, and I'll first say that even though OnShift is a portfolio company, if you had asked me a couple years ago, would 60% of new hires be out of state? I would have said not a chance. So predictions are tough. But what do you guys see coming down the pike in terms of talent, whether it's acquiring, managing, living with, thriving with, that we all need to think about here?
I will jump in and say I think anyone that is going to start to require employees to come back to the office and operate pre-COVID is going to be met with some turnover issues, because I think everyone had a reset with their values, they had a reset with how they do work and how they can work, and there's other companies out there that will very quickly come in and swoop those employees up. It's almost not good press to put that out there at this point, because we can poach people specifically for that reason. So I think going back to thinking that we have to go back to the way the company was before 2020, I think the rest of the world's going to be moving past you.
I think to piggyback off of that, I 100% agree. Candidates will even respond to my in-mail, even if I put it in there that it's a remote role, like to confirm this is a work from home, because sometimes they'll say, because that's why I'm looking to leave my current role. And it's simple things where people are like, I was commuting 30 minutes there and 30 minutes back, and we say to ourselves, it's only an hour. It's still an hour that's grouped in with work. So it's right. If I know that there's a company that is kind of having everyone going to the office, that's one of the first people I'm going to pull from. Mm-hmm. And I think it ties back to, while you're selecting talent, if you're going to allow a remote workforce of any kind, you really have to trust the person that you're hiring. You really have to, and you have to trust your employees, because if you don't trust the people you're hiring or the people that are around you, it's not going to work out. Then you may as well all come into the office.
Mm-hmm. I think in about 6 months, it'll be the best time to hire people ever. I think there's a dark side to this. I believe that there will be a global recession by the end of the year. You have to look no further than the energy crisis in Europe to realize that 25% of the S&P 500 valuation to realize what that actually does. You're going to see a decrease in discretionary spending. That's going to cause stocks to go down. We'll hit the recession. What that actually means, though, is that the budgets for the end of the year won't have the layoffs that we're seeing today aren't the ones you're going to see towards the beginning of next year when the big layoff waves come from the large companies that are currently cash rich as they cut their R&D budgets. But what that also means is a lot of good people are going to be on the market. And so the best companies are built in recessions for a reason. It's time to get out there, start hustling, find out where people might start thinking about layoffs right now to bring those people in and say, I want that person, that person, that person. Because it's not just the layoffs that get affected, it's the people around the people being laid off too that start thinking about looking as well.
So just want to make sure I'm staying on track here. Question again, future of hiring, future of talent, right? I think the assessments like we talked about I'm seeing them pop up more and more, and I think they're going to be critical not only to make sure you're hiring the right person if you're in a virtual world, but that you're enabling the collaboration, especially if you're virtual, and that quick relationship building that really helps with that. I do agree that, the old way of working, right, doesn't work now, but I do think that, and we've seen this shift with Apple, we've seen a shift with some of the big tech companies starting to pull people back in, and it's more of a, not that you have to be at your desk from 9 to 5, it's more of, we need some meaningful interaction, and just being here tonight with everybody in person rather than a screen is so much more impactful and powerful. And so I think companies will start to use that to their advantage and in the right context to bring people together and invest in those meaningful interactions and the meaningful presence of being around each other to drive their business forward. And don't ask me what that looks like because I have no idea. But I think it's a question that we're talking through, and I think it's going to be a big experiment for the future of companies.